Go to logi.gg/Datto and use code Datto10 to save 10% on Logitech purchases. Check the link in the description. All 4 catalysts for Wishkeeper are now available to earn. They've been available for a minute now. And now that I'm getting back into content world, it's time to answer the question that's been on everybody's mind. Do any of these catalysts even matter at all? Let's start with the one that I think matters the least, and that is Vorpal Weapon. I have historically never liked Vorpal Weapon on primary weapons because you shouldn't be using primary weapons on targets that Vorpal Weapon affects, which is mainly bosses and champions. However, I understand there being some amount of appeal because you can suspend champions, and this bow deals way more damage to suspended targets. So what's another 20% on top of that? It sounds pretty nice. And I will say that it does deal a fair amount of damage per shot, but Suspend has gotten a nerf to last not as long. So you're only going to get a couple of shots worth of bonus damage before the champion comes back down to the ground. To me, that is not worth the trade-off of giving up one of the other 3 options you have available to you, especially when the bulk of the bonus on suspended targets is intrinsic on the bow already. That's not to say that there isn't any use case for it, but considering how annoying it is to have to go back to the Enclave and switch the perk, you really need a specific use case to go with Vorpal, and I guess that use case is you're a solo gamer who only runs Legend Lost Sectors while running double primary or something. Next up are the 2 Suspend effects. The Suspend trap itself lasts longer, or you spawn more triggers when you shoot the trap arrow. My original thought on this was that I wasn't really going to be interested in either one of these effects because, number one, the trap already lasts a decently long time, and if I'm in a situation where there's a lot of enemies, I'm probably just going to drop a new trap. And 2, the trap already has enough triggers to capture quite a lot of enemies, and the amount of times I think your trap is going to fully use every trigger is quite rare. An enhanced duration trap lasts 15 seconds, 5 seconds longer than a normal one, which I think is a little on the weak side, but okay. The biggest argument for using this catalyst that I've seen is that you can use it to chain suspend champions because the trap lasts long enough now to repeat the suspend multiple times over. And that's fine, but there is a caveat to that. There is an internal cooldown as to how quickly a champion can be resuspended from the trap. If you go to try to suspend lock a champion with the trap without stunning it first, you are going to fail miserably at doing so, and I really wouldn't recommend it. I feel like the order of operations is suspend via the trap, stun them, they come back alive from the stun, then they get resuspended, then you try to re-stun them again when they're vulnerable. You really need thread of continuity for this though, because otherwise the suspend isn't long enough to give you that much value. Is this something that I think people might like, especially since Season of the Wish has Unstoppable Bow? Yes. Is it something that I personally value? No, not really. But it does give you more of a fighting chance to take care of champions if you're someone who struggles with champion combat to a degree. Just don't use the bow itself to kill the champion. An enhanced trap that can suspend more enemies gets a couple of extra lines within the trap, although sometimes the way the spikes plant into the ground, you won't always get more lines. In my testing, I have never felt like I needed more triggers on the trap because what the bow normally gives is typically more than sufficient given how many enemies will actually interact with the trap on average. You need a giant cluster of enemies to all be grouped up to even come close to using all of the triggers. Now, will there be some times where you're down to 1 or 2 lines and they're not in the correct orientation to trap something, whereas running this catalyst would have given you what you needed? Sure. Is that worth slotting this catalyst into the bow? I don't really think so. This also has no effect on the whole back-to-back suspending champions situation either. This brings us to Hatchling, the final of the catalysts, and the one with the most amount of promise. Hatchling on its own is an okay perk now that they have buffed Threadlings, but when you build into it, it becomes a bit more enjoyable. Warlocks and Hunters have some Threadling-based setups they can work with, while Titans only really have aspects to work with, although that's not to say that they can't play with Threadlings as well. They just don't have the extra Threadling potential and bonuses like Warlocks and Hunters do with their exotics or their fragments. What's nice about Threadlings is that if they kill something that's suspended, that's going to go towards your next trap shot. The two negatives to that are, one, you miss out on a precision kill for a Threadling kill, which means you only get one stack instead of two, and two, there tends to be so much happening while playing with this type of setup that your Threadlings feel almost uncontrollable. On my Warlock, I went with Swarmers, as you'll have a good flow of tangles, and unraveling targets is always nice for some extra damage over time. I went with Mind Spun Invocation and Weaver's Call for more Threadling action and more Suspend capabilities. My fragment choices are probably not going to blow your mind in Generation, Warding, Fury, and Evolution, getting that bonus Threadling damage, and then otherwise just very generically buffing myself when I'm doing things. This setup can feel pretty overwhelming at first with how many things are happening on the screen and how many things you have access to, but it really just comes down to making sure you're using your trap shot whenever possible, and then focus on precision kills to spawn Threadlings, while using Rifts to spawn in more Threadlings for yourself, and then eating your grenade for more Suspend effects, which, now that I'm saying it back, yeah, that's a lot of things to remember, but you'll get used to it. Remember that any Suspend effect works for you getting more stacks for Wishkeeper. Do I think you could tweak this build? Of course, this is just one of many potential setups depending on your goals. I'm not going to test every single combination of every single thing. I mentioned Mind Spun Invocation last time. How much more AoE Suspend do we really need? Again, it's not going to hurt you here. Having something a bit more on demand can be really nice versus having to try to kill something to proc a Suspend. Then I actually threw on the seasonal artifact perks, and things got pretty out of control because of how much extra damage was going out. And for at-level enemies, between the Unravel and the Threadlings and whatever else was exploding, I was barely able to get stacks for my bow to drop traps. And at that point, could you just throw on a weapon with Hatchling and call it a day? Yeah, I think you can, because I tried that, and I would say that the efficacy of that was pretty much 95 to 99% of what this bow is capable of in at-level content. Once the level starts to increase and things aren't erupting immediately, and bow shots have a lot more value, they're not doing this insane overkill, then you can start to hit more shots with the bow before everything just explodes and dies. After hopping into a legendary campaign mission for a little bit, this thing, it cooked a little bit harder than I thought it was going to. You just gotta make sure Threadlings are flowing. The artifact perks, again, help quite a lot, but even without them, it was still doing quite well with this setup. I, again, tested just running a regular Hatchling weapon, in this case the Immortal, and it also did very well. But I will say that for higher difficulty, I liked the bow slightly more. Keep in mind that all of this was in solo play, and if you're running with a group, you're not going to be able to completely take over the game in the same way. Hatchling definitely increases the fun factor of using the bow, but do you need to spec super hard into Threadlings to continue using the bow in the way that you've been using it? I don't think so, but having some amount of synergy in your build nowadays is always going to be a good thing. So yeah, that's what's up with the catalysts. It's basically what I thought was going to happen. Hatchling is basically the only perk I'm really considering for the bow as of right now. I think something that I wouldn't mind seeing is perhaps making the AoE field of the trap bigger on one of the catalysts. I think that would be some level of enticing over having more triggers, because I just don't think you're going to use that many of the triggers in game every single time. Was Hatchling enough to get me to fall in love with the bow? Not completely, but this season anyway, with some of the strand bonuses, it can cause some damage, and I think makes for a pretty fun experience. I will consider putting this kind of build into my rotation, because Unstoppable Bow is a thing this season, so I don't need to worry about managing my Suspend effects and my anti-champion capabilities, because Unstop is on the bow, so that's nice. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.